You're watching the free version of SynthEyes Essentials. For projects and footage, head to BorisFX.com for the premium download. Hey, and welcome back to part 3 on exporting from SynthEyes. In the last class we took a look at universal software-agnostic exports and also started our round-tripping example with exporting to Blender. Our render is done by now, and we can get right into exporting to Fusion. Let's go! When we choose the Fusion exporter, things look even more overwhelming than with the Alembic or Blender exporter. Don't panic. Like before, a lot of this is either already known to us or in there just in case we need it. We will leave a lot of this at the defaults. Unlike the Blender exporter, this will not create a Python script that then modifies a startup scene, but instead will create a brand new Fusion composition for us. But let's start from the top and go through this step by step. So the first two controls are already familiar to us, timeline setup and starting frame. The next three items are preferences on how the Fusion scene we are about to create should be set up: bit depth, quality of rendering, and interactivity. You can set them up here, but if you need to change them later on, you can just do that inside of Fusion. The next section is all about how our trackers are represented inside of Fusion. Do we want trackers that can be rendered? In some cases that might be useful. Do we want to use Fusion's point cloud node? If you have a lot of trackers, like we do in our scene, you definitely want to have that switched on. Otherwise your script will be absolutely clustered with nodes. But you can also limit the number of trackers to be exported to Fusion. By default, this is set to 20. If you want to have a point cloud node with everything, set this to 0. That will disable the limiter. Now on to relative tracker size. This is how big the trackers will appear in Fusion. As we can easily change this on the Fusion side as well, we will leave this on the defaults for now. We will skip over planar as planes, as we didn't do any planar tracking. Use lens distortion node. Leave this on. That way SynthEyes will transfer the distortion coefficients to Fusion's native lens distortion node. But this will only work if you use a compatible lens distortion model, like the standard radial fourth order. If you use an incompatible one, the distortion coefficients will just zero out. The next three items consider an older lens distortion workflow, so we will skip over those. These two settings are only important if SynthEyes needs to supply us T-maps. The texture node checkbox will force Fusion's native texture node to do the undistortion, while leaving it unchecked will use SynthEyes' own node to be used, which supports alpha channels. The STMap file type should be OpenEXR. The relative screen distance will determine how far the screen for our projected footage is in 3D space. In this section, we can configure how we want the meshes to appear in our Fusion script. I will skip over this whole section next, as we don't transfer any lights from SynthEyes over to Fusion. Before we come to the end, there's once again a section for our favorite pipeline TD, and then we can specify where Fusion lives on our computer and if we want that script immediately to open after export. Be aware that for this to work, Fusion should not be open by the time you hit OK. And last but not least, there is the lens workflow. In order for our Blender render to work in this Fusion script, we need this to be on re-distorted 2 as well. Let's take a peek into Finder to see what SynthEyes actually has written to disk. Naturally, there's our Fusion composition. But there are also two OBJs which will be referenced as our geometry. You don't have to do anything here, they will already be properly linked in the Fusion comp. But if you move this to another location, be aware that you will have to relink those two files. Now, finally we are in Fusion. I will be going over this in very broad strokes, but if you are familiar with Fusion, then the whole export here is a treasure trove for you to pick from to build your own comp. On the top left, we see our footage. That is linked to the exact same location where SynthEyes got it from. Below that, two nodes take care of the undistortion. First, the canvas will be extended, and then the undistortion will be applied. We of course have our camera, and we've got our point cloud. Here are our two reference geometries. And everything goes into a scene to combine it. As I said, a great jumping off point for starting your own comp work. Let's talk about scaling a bit. Unlike Blender, Fusion is working in units, just like SynthEyes. What is helpful though with knowing the correct scaling established in the SynthEyes scene is that a cube we generate inside of Fusion, that is 4 units wide, is exactly the same size as the cube that we created in SynthEyes. The renderer is also there, but the output is of course still undistorted. So one lens node and one resize node to bring everything back to its original size and distortion. Without getting into too much detail, I will quickly show you how to treat the CG we rendered out of Blender inside of Fusion. This is our render from Blender, and lo and behold, it has the same overscan resolution as the result of our undistort node. If we just comp that straight over the original footage, my CG will be drifting, because I'm putting the undistorted CG over the still distorted footage. If I instead merge the CG over the output of my undistort node, they match. Brilliant! Now the next logical step would be to copy over the re-distortion nodes and apply them to our merge node. There's a smarter way. Copy over the re-distortion and resize nodes and apply them only to your CG and then merge that on top of your original footage. That way, you get no filtering on your background. And as you can see, you can easily copy those nodes along your script. So take a look here. In this state of the comp, I've got a shadow path that gets comped on first, and after that, I apply the actual render. But both have the re-distortion and resize nodes applied at the end of their respective comp streams. As I said, Blender and Fusion are just examples. If you're using a different piece of software, there are exporters for Maya, for Houdini, Flame, Nuke, After Effects, and so many more. But the overall structure of the exporters, the controls, the terminology, all those will be similar. And the user manual has detailed descriptions on each of these options. What I would definitely suggest is that you give your export a trial run before you actually start on your work. But I think we all agree that this is all quite a lot to keep track of when working on a production. Saving your settings away as a preset would definitely be a smart move and save you a lot of headaches. But we can be even smarter. As my final tip for SynthEyes Essentials, I want to introduce you to the multi-exporter. Think of this as your shopping list for what to get from SynthEyes. What we will do now is compile a list of exporters with all our defined options and save that away as a single action we can execute once we are ready to export a scene. And we will do this so smartly that we don't even have to worry about naming these. Choose the multi-export from the File menu. Now we are going to replicate the export we've been doing for this whole class. We are going to start by adding a save sequence to MOV exporter. When the settings work for you, click Settings OK. No export is happening yet, but we still need to add a file path. But we are going to be really clever about this and use a relative file path. So clear out this stuff here first, blank slate. So what is a relative file path? That means SynthEyes will take a look where the SynthEyes scene you are currently working on is located and then find the place it is supposed to export to relative to that file's location. Take a look here. My SynthEyes scene lives in 03 scripts, 01 SynthEyes. How can we tell SynthEyes that this is the starting point? By using a Filename tag. There are a lot of those, and your pipeline TD will be really happy about that. But we are going to need just one. The scene files folder, abbreviated scene dir in our little string here. Now I want my reference movie to go into this folder, 04 render, 01 from SynthEyes. That means from the place where my SynthEyes file lives, I first need to go up 2 directories. I can do that in the string by entering /... and once more /... From there, we just enter the names of the respective directories. I can also let SynthEyes create new directories. So let's ask for a reference folder. And how about the file name? Okay, I lied. We are actually going to use 2 Filename tags. This time, we are just going to use the name of our SynthEyes scene. The Filename tag for that is scene file base name or scene name. Let's add an underscore and the word reference and, last but not least, our file extension. And now we repeat that for every item we want to have on our multi-exporter list. There are a couple of things to be aware of though. As you might have guessed, BST maps are not part of this, as they are not an exporter, but their own dedicated item in the menu bar. You might want to be careful with launching applications from these multi-exporters. Maybe you don't want SynthEyes to open up 2 CG applications and 3 comp tools at the same time. And last but not least, the multi-exporter works best within newer lens distortion models. So if you need to switch between lens models often, you might want to consider saving a dedicated multi-exporter preset for that. But once you set this up and saved it away, you can call this up every time you need it. So let's see our little multi-export shopping list in action. Check all the exporters you want to run, press Run All, and boom! There's my Fusion script, there's my Blender Python script. Here are the reference and undistorted image sequences, and our Alembic found its way as well. Of course, this only works if you adhere to the same folder structure on each project, but if you do, this can be a huge time saver. Of course, there is no single one approach to this, and the SynthEyes export options are really flexible for a reason, to fit all kinds of requirements. But I hope this class gave you a good idea on what to keep in mind when doing your exports. Be diligent with this. As you can see, there are a lot of things to be aware of depending on how your data is supposed to be used downstream. And if you've got the time, trial run your exports before you actually use them in production. After that, it should be smooth sailing. That's it. You've made it to the end of SynthEyes Essentials. Congratulations. And while there is much more to explore and learn in SynthEyes, I hope that this course has given you a solid foundation for solving your own shots in SynthEyes. Thank you so much for watching, and bye-bye.